Hey, everybody. Welcome into the ProBox TV studio for Boxing Scene Today. Well, one of our own, in a sense, a pro box fighter, Ramon Cardenas, of course, taking on the monster, Naoya Inoue, in May in the biggest fight of his career. If you check out Boxing Scene right now, an interview with him talking about, I will not be awed by the skill of a man who will be, at the end of the day, an all-time great. Is he right, and will he have what we call happy to be here? Well, a couple guys that are happy to be here with me, Jimmy Smith in studio, the champs, Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi. Chris, let's talk about it, all right? It's the kiss of death in combat sports. We've seen it in all of them. The happy to be here is the guy who's like, man, I made it. I'm in a big fight. Isn't this great? They look like they're in freaking Disneyland, and they get beat up because at some level, they don't believe they're on this level. It's a place they're visiting, not a place they can stay. Is that the danger if you're Ramon Cardenas or his team?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say that I'm not exactly happy to be here with you, by the way. Just for you to assume that kind of gets me thinking
not what he says off camera. He's thrilled to be here. Go ahead. Make more of a show for the fans.
But in terms of Ramon Cardenas and where he's at right now, he even said it himself. He didn't expect to get this fight right now, because David Picasso was the guy that everybody was looking at to take the Inoue fight. That fight didn't happen, whether it was Picasso not taking it or the powers that be saying it wasn't the fight. In comes Ramon, who he didn't expect that. But what I do like about Ramon, whether, because you're not really going to see if you have the happy to be theirs until you get there. So we're not going to know. You can say all the right things, but we'll see what happens when you get in the ring. But I will say this, though. He was in the orbit of this fight being possible for the last couple months and ended up taking on a really tough fighter in Brian Acosta on our air, and he didn't have to do that. He was highly ranked on so many of the organizations, really across the board. A lot of guys will sit back on something like that and not take on a 20-0 undefeated, almost 6 foot tall, 122-pounder.
Mexican stud, yes.
But he did. Yeah. But he did, and he showed a lot of mettle in that fight because he had to come back from some dire straits. He got cracked with a left hook high in the head, went down. In a fight that he won a lot of the early rounds and had to keep battling. So I think he learned a lot in that fight, and I think that really bodes well for him going forward. And you can see even in his interviews, he talks about that you're almost good as your last performance, and he looks at that performance like, I showed something I haven't really had to show before. And I think all of the fights that he's had in our area, he broke his hand in one of those fights where he had to come back to find victory once again. So at the very least, he's been hardened by the tough fights that he's had in our air. And a lot of times when that happens, like when you get to that moment, you're like, listen, man, I've touched this before. Yes, I haven't been with this guy, but I'm ready to show out once again. So I think it bodes well for him going into the fight, the momentum that he has.
But the idea of the size of the fight doesn't hit you until you're there. Paul, you've been in huge fights with huge opposition. This idea of walking into the arena, you're like, man, I've never seen this before. The guys who can shut that out are the guys who have success. Is that key to you?
It is key. I also think, though, that whether you're going to fight that way or fight with desire, you kind of show some of those character traits on coming up the ladder. Obviously, you're never in as big of a fight as when you get to that big fight, but there are moments in certain parts of your career early on where you may have to overcome some small level of pushback.
Not always small.
Not always small. You may have to get up off the canvas in a fight that you win. You may hurt your hands. You may get an injury. You may have to show some desire in some other ways that maybe I feel like, may not be noticed all the time, And I think you can sort of pick up the character traits of a fighter who, when he gets there, you're going to say, okay, this guy, I've seen him, he's gonna, I know he's got it in him to dig down and fight, and for me, Cardenas seems like that kind of guy. He got up off the canvas against Acosta, and he didn't start fouling or lose his mind a little bit or try to coast to the end. He roared back and actually, closed that show strong, So again, things like that, character traits, he's hurt his hand in the past, had to overcome that. So I
didn't allude to it at all when he did hurt his hand. He just found a way to win.
I feel like you can notice it in some way, shape, or form when a guy is gonna sort of behave like this when he gets to the big fight. Not always, but you do try to pick up little clues and little pieces of evidence. And I with Cardenas, nothing else has been shown to me except that he has a warrior mentality. He has a fighting mentality. He wants more than just to be here. He wants to be in the club. He doesn't want to visit the club, you know? And this club is the championship club, the world-class elite club, the room when they let you in it. Now you're in the conversation in any big fight all the time, you know, because now you've been in it. You may win, you may lose, but you're in that club for a while, you know? And I feel like, you know, Cardenas is right here, and I feel like he knows that he can't just show up and be happy to be here. It's an amazing feeling. But I'll tell you what, most guys that are happy to be here, they probably lose themselves on the way to the ring, you know, on the walk to the ring. Because you're like, now the reality, now the party's over. Yeah. Now it's like, oh man, I got to actually fight, dude. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just the press conferences are done. They take all your pictures. You got more people taking pictures of you than ever before. You got more articles being written about you than ever before. You know, all that is done. And all of a sudden you get in the ring and the referee says, everybody out, fighters to the middle. And it hits you. It's going to hit you right there. It hits all of us. But if you were happy to be there until that point, it's about to hit you hard.
So I got a personal story, you know, fighting Manny Pacquiao, similar thing, going into this humongous fight. And I did not have the happy to be there, but members of my team did. Mm-hmm. And it was wildly apparent throughout camp. And it really hurt my preparation to the ring. And like I was going to say about Cardenas, even if he doesn't have a case of the happy to be there's, he's still fighting a guy who is phenomenal. Yeah. And it might not show, okay, he might get blown away. It doesn't mean that he's just happy to be there. Yeah. He's fighting a guy who's at a certain level. But I remember, I wasn't happy to be there, but I wasn't ready for that moment when I got to it. So there's always that aspect too. But yeah, you got to be careful about the people around you. And that brings me to my next point with that, Joel Diaz. He's been here.
About to bring that up, yeah.
He's fought Manny Pacquiao before. He's been opposite corner of Manny Pacquiao. He's been in big fights. And if Ramon is the kind of guy that maybe starts showing it a little bit, Joel's going to knock that out of him quick. And when it comes down to it, the rest of his team, at least we know Joel, is not going to succumb to that.
How does that manifest itself? When you say my team had a little bit of the happy to be here, was it a lack of focus in camp? How did it manifest itself in terms of getting ready for the fight?
Without giving away too much
personal stuff.
Too
the bus, yeah.
Too jovial,
too happy to be there. Like literally showing off for not being as dogged and steadfast in training, being like, oh, well, you know, we don't have to do that little extra today, or canceling a session, or showing up not fully prepared that they should be. Listen, coaching is not an easy job.
No,
you have to show up just as prepared as the fighter does. And I had sessions where my coaches were not showing up prepared. They weren't. Yeah. They weren't alive the way they needed to be, or locked in the way that I was.
It can happen. I feel like there's been times in my career where it could have, you know, not every time, but there's been times, especially that first time you get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
they have that idea. We made it, guys.
There's a lot of, and it's not necessarily coaches. It can be managers. It can be, you know, it can be, you know, that's an interesting one too. And I think this is a test, not just for Cardenas, but his whole team in general. But having a guy like Joel Diaz who had Tim Bradley in these big events, big moments.
He's with Matisse too.
Matisse, he can sort of guide the ship in the right way. I will say this too. I talked about usually you see clues, but it's not always. You don't always. Nothing in Jermell Charlo's career would have led me to believe that he would have showed up against Canelo Alvarez in a happy to be here mentality. I would have never ever thought that in my life. The way I had seen Jermell Charlo in his career, dogged fight against Castano, and just a championship level through and through. I would have bet you all kinds of farmland that he wouldn't have showed up to just happy to be there. He showed up in such a happy to be here mentality that he caused his brother to fight, because they were talking about at the time that Jamal was going to fight. He was so happy to be here and fought in such a happy to be here moment that he actually, that the TV networks were like, bro, we're not even going to bother putting this guy's twin brother just because he looks so much like him. It's horrible.
It'll remind people of that fight.
It was that bad.
You don't want people to turn around and be like, oh no, it's a replay, and then they shut it off.
Yeah, it was that bad. And so you don't always get the clues, but sometimes you do get the clues. For example, for me, Berlanga's fought in a happy to be here moment against Canelo. But if you look at Berlanga's come up the ladder, you know, he'd been dropped, you know, then he's biting people when he gets frustrated. The big moment sort of gets to him. He's a little bit bothered by tough moments. And then you're like, well, if he's showed the bothersome and tough moments against lesser opposition, how is he going to ever show up at this level? Well, you know, show up happy to be here. You know, you make sure, because here's the thing. You may get stopped if you try to win.
Right.
But if you go happy to be here and just try to, you know, dance around, you can save face and not get stopped. But is it dude, to agree, Conor McGregor did that with Mayweather as well. You know what I mean? He was Instagramming it up the whole time, mountain biking 20 miles a day, whatever he thought he was trying to show you. Then he showed up to the fight, happy to be there. You know, so again, he
had 150 million reasons to be happy to be there.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
but a lot of people do. I mean, that's part of the happy to be here.
But there's always a lot of millions to happy to be here. There's always millions on the table when you're happy to be there. So the impact of the fighter mentality is not to let the money make you just feel you're happy to be here and be there for more than the money. Be there for something that represents you. Be there for something inside of you. And I'll tell you what, again, going for the win as opposed to going there to survive risks getting you stopped. Mm-hmm. But are you going to put your head on the chopping block and put your neck out there and risk greatness, risk trying to achieve more than you're supposed to? You know, it's different. It's very, very tough. I say this, and I don't know if everybody's going to understand this. It's very, very tough. It's a very tough decision to make on fight night and the preparation. You go to sleep at night. That mental edge inside you, your brain is running 100 miles a minute constantly. To perform or be the deer in the headlights, it's not easy when it's that big of a moment. This is not a criticism. This is more of an explanation of the different mindsets that can happen as you lead into these big moments. And different guys have different outcomes.
It's a form of quiet quitting. When a guy decides that he's not going to try to win and he's going to try to survive. And they don't necessarily have to have it in their mind, I'm just going to try and survive, but they fight with the, I'm going to hit you with the stay off me punches. I'm going to evade rather than take that counter. Take that chance. Listen, if you're going for it, you risk embarrassing yourself. Always. Yeah. Always. And that's part of this sport. And that's why boxers are generally, when you meet them in person, are so humble. Because we've been embarrassed, whether it's in the gym, whether it's on fight night. We've been humbled, rather, not embarrassed. We've been humbled by embarrassing moments, because that's what thing. If you go for it, if you consistently go for it, and you consistently do it against the top opposition and top level, you're going to get humbled. It's just part of it. And there's a lot of times the guys they're not willing to go that extra reach, and they have that little bit of quiet quit in them, and it always shows up much bigger because on fight night you're under a magnifying glass and you're naked. So, the fighters can see that, though. Like how you're calling out, Belanca. You can see when you're not really there to try and win.
The opposite, Lamont Roach Jr. against Gervonta Davis. We didn't watch it together. We never watched it. We all watched it separately. But all of us off camera said to each other, man, he looked dialed in. You could see during the walk-in, you could see during the crowd booing, he didn't give a flying, he was locked in from the beginning.
But even with Lamont, right? I mean, whether you believed in him or not, and I didn't think he had a chance going into the Gervonta Davis fight, and odds makers clearly didn't either, so he surprised a lot of people. But you knew character-wise he'd show up, regardless, because he showed up against Herring. He just wasn't prepared, but he showed up. Well,
I hear some disagreement.
He showed up. What I'm saying is he wasn't happy to be there, but he was sort of unprepared for the moment, right? But it's different than being unprepared for the moment and also happy to be here. I think he showed on fight night against Gervonta by going to the puncher, backing up the puncher, going to the puncher. That's a mentality. That's a mindset you bring to the ring, and it's not just, whoa, I'm happy to be here. Whoa, this is okay. How do I handle this? No. Now he's dialed in and he made it happen. But I want your thoughts.
Well, you said that there's certain tells on the way up where you're going to see a guy if he is going to be one of those guys who shows up happy to be there. And I actually took that Jamel Herring fight from Lamont Roach that he was going to be a guy who was just going to show up and happy to be there, because I thought in the Jamel Herring fight, I thought it was one of those I'm not going to take a risk because I might get hit, because he didn't throw any punches in that fight. He really kept his hands in his pockets all night long. But in hindsight, now that I've seen him, the way that he performed the Gervonta Davis fight, I actually think that the Jamel Herring fight was because he was too much in his head. Yeah. And not so much in a negative way, but just trying to be perfect, trying to capture the moment. Like you said, maybe not
That's where you know too much and you're overthinking, right?
Exactly.
Because you got so much experience in the amateurs and whatnot that you end up overthinking.
But I don't think he had enough experience. Like you said, I think he put.
But he had enough experience.
He wasn't ready for that. He wasn't ready for that moment at that time, which I've been there as well. But then once he got the Gervonta fight, the happen to be there's it's in your DNA. He didn't have it in his. He doesn't have it in his DNA. Yeah. And he showed up at that fight like, I've been here before and fell short because of this. I'm not letting that happen again. And this was the reason he was in that fight.
Conscious decision. And conscious decision goes the other way. We're happy to be here because I've seen Jamel, the savagery of the Castano fights, which weren't that long before the Canelo fights and whatnot. So he has it. It's there. So that's a conscious decision that he made, happy to be there. Even Berlanga had a run of 17, 18 knockouts in a row, first-round knockouts in a row when he started his career, right? I mean, the savagery is there. The mindset is there. All of a sudden, where to go? You know what I mean? That's the conscious decision.
Well, I fought some of literally the biggest punchers of a generation, and I tried to win every fight. Like I wasn't trying to just get I wasn't trying not to get hurt. I got hurt in those fights. I tried to win. I was always trying to take those opportunities. I feel like you're the guy that you don't. Like these guys, and I mean, I don't mean going for it. I mean not going for it. I think you either got the quit in you or you don't.
What I'm curious about, will there be, Paulie, let me start with you. Marquez, all right, is over your shoulder to your right. Juan Manuel Marquez knocked down 3 times against Manny Pacquiao, came back and get a draw. Nacho Beristain famously went, that's over. The worst is over. We got him from here on out. And Marquez told me, we were in a car together, and he goes, when Nacho went, we got him now. He goes, I just got up 3 times in round 1.
Got him right where we want him.
We got him right where we want him, champ. And he kind of fed me this line of like, all right, now we got him because he put everything into that.
That's the worst of it, right?
It's not going to get worse than knocked out 3 times in one round.
No, that's not true because it could definitely get worse. So you can knock down 3 more times.
Do you see Foreman? Do you remember Foreman Frazier? But what I'm curious about is, will we see that moment for Cardenas? Because Inoue has that kind of Pacquiao speed and power where, they're going to go, okay, Ramon, now you got to deal with, like, getting over a hump of when you actually see the speed and feel the power like you did with Pacquiao, where he's going to get over that hump. Are we going to see that?
Well, I mean, I think that Cardenas, whether he wins or loses, and it's hard to pick him to win the fight. It's hard to pick anybody to beat Inoue, but I think Cardenas will go to win. We'll see. But I think Cardenas will go out on his shield regardless of whichever way he goes
He's
out.
all punching.
Yeah. But there are mental signs that you need to take with you, and I think there's 2 books that really talk about a lot of this, and one of them is your book. So
You Want to Be a Fighter?
So You Want to Be a Fighter, and the other one is with Teddy Atlas, in his story too. And there are always just moments. You know what I mean? It could get worse. Yeah, it could get worse, but you got to, just like a moment can be bad in a fight, the next moment can be for you. It's just a matter of, do you believe it can be for you? Because if you think it's all in the psychology. If you think a bad moment is so bad that it's like that it's going to consume you, and you're mentally you're never going to get yourself into the fight at all. If your mentality is okay, it's just a moment, well, suddenly you can
those moments add up.
You can suddenly turn the moment, and then the next moment is for you. Of course, you got to keep the same thing in mind. Don't rest on your laurels that you had a good moment, because now the moment can change back against you. At world class level, you have these momentum swings, and there's this mental battle going on with your opponent and with yourself, as well as the physical battle. And I think all of this has to be kept in mind. That's why you have a training camp. It's not just for the physical preparation; it's also for the mental preparation of being in these kind of fights as well. A lot of times during your come up. And we referred to Belen getting the first round knockouts. A lot of times you hit a guy, they leave you alone. That's it. Or you get them out of there if you're a big puncher like Edgar was, or in general you just start beating them up. Like I wasn't a big puncher, but you start beating them up, and you can tell you've taken over the fight. They understand.
Or some guys you flash speed and they shell up.
Yeah, yep. But at a world class level, that ain't impressing them, bro.
No,
They're ready for all of it. So you've got to actually beat it out of them, or they will beat it out of you. It's a different mindset, or if you don't want to beat it out of you, you show up happy to be here and figure out a way to go 12 rounds without taking a shot. And if you can sleep at night doing that, God bless. I would not have been able to do that.
Alluding to the Marquez and the Pacquiao, I used to look at it just like the judges score a round. Once the scoring is locked, it's over. It's in the past.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do now.
Yeah.
So my fight with Ruslan, I went down 2 times in the first round. I went down for 1 time, took a knee 1 time. That's a 10-7 round in the start of a world championship fight. 12 rounds is a long time, sure, but 10-7 is a deep hole.
Yeah.
A deep hole. And my corner, my coach at that time, which he was very prepared for that fight, I sit down, and everyone's panicking. My eye is literally swollen shut already in the first round, and I got dropped twice against a murderous puncher. And that's why I said when you said, "Oh, this is the worst it can be." No, it's not. When you got Ruslan Vanikov in front of you and you got one eye, it can get a lot worse.
Yeah.
And especially when I thought he broke my skull, which he did. But I sit down, and the first thing my coach says to me, "We are all right, baby. You still got your lead eye." Because it was my right eye.
Yeah.
So my left side's in front. So he goes, so he took the positive from this. He's like, hey, we can still see the right hand's coming. Don't worry. You got your jab. You can out jab him all night long.
You've got to, take the positive out of all that moment.
Yep. And it took everybody, it disarmed everyone. And everyone was just like, all right, we're good. And I wasn't panicking. So my team was like, he's not panicking. We don't need to panic. My cut man panicked, but we went through with the fight. And then I said, I put that in the back seat. That's in the rear view mirror now. I just got to go forward, win round after round after round. And then it was crazy. By like the 7th, 8th round, I'm in my head like, I'm winning this fight. I'm arguing with the doctor that, no, don't stop the fight. I'm winning. Andre Ward is on the air saying, I got Chris ahead and later in the fight. And
I was on Sky saying, you were ahead.
Yeah, as you go on like that, you just think each round, next round. You can't think about the past, and you can't let that dwell with you. And that's part of what I think when it comes to your mindset, like we were talking about with Lamont Rocha in the Herring fight, we're talking about Cardenas with this fight.
Needing in this fight, yeah.
Yeah, you just got to have one foot in front of the other and just think ahead, man. Like, yeah, that guy's got that pass. Inoue's that guy. But guess what, man? You're right here. You're here.
Yeah. The thing about Inoue, though, and I think Provodnikov in your fight, when Cotto in my fight, they have clubbing power.
Yes.
It's not that snap power where they separate you from consciousness. I remember like guys like Felix Trinidad had that whip power, you know, would separate you from consciousness. It's not clubbing. Like
Tommy Hearns snapped all his punches.
Yeah, separate you from it's not like George Foreman had the clubbing power, you know. Those kind of guys, they hit hard too.
Yeah.
It's not snap power, it's clubbing power. But they put you in so much pain that they beat the fight out of you.
Yeah.
And a lot of their stoppages are just beating the freaking crap out of you and beating the fight
you
out
fought
of you.
Cotto at 40. At 40, he used to make guys' faces change.
But what I'm saying is, you know, the danger here for Cardenas is Inoue has that snap power. Yeah, he can separate you from consciousness. Yeah. It's a wow, you know, and all of a sudden you want to. Those kind of guys, I feel, are more dangerous because it's maybe less painful because they'll put you out of your misery quicker. But you don't have a choice, dude. If you can't walk, the referee's going to stop the fight. While when you're being clubbed to death, so for lack of a better term, you can make a conscious decision. I can take this. I'm going to keep taking it, and I'm going to keep fighting, and I'm going to.
It's not being tough at that point. It's a physiological shutdown. So if you get hit on that chin, bing, you go to sleep.
So I think with Cardenas and Inoue, you know, the interesting thing about it is if you're Cardenas, you have to take into account, you know, he's human too. I can hit him in the face. Why was he going to react when I crack him? Because Cardenas has some really nice fluid boxing as well.
Both hands,
you know, so
and,
both hands.
And we're at 22.
So you're bringing what you bring to the table too. Okay, you know, you got your tools. I'm gonna bring my tools right here. I'm gonna use them to the best of my ability, and that's sort of what you got to do. That's the mentality you got to. If you're coming to win. Again, this is taking aside the happy to be here mentality. Because if you bring the happy to be here mentality, this conversation doesn't even apply. But if you're there to win, you put your tools on the table, so to speak, if figuratively speaking, and you're saying, okay, these are the tools I'm going to use. I'm going to use this. I'm going to punch him in the mouth. You punch him in the mouth, okay, he ain't going anywhere, right? But at the same time, you gain confidence from that. You take that moment, you build that moment, and you sort of build on it. And very much like Champ just talked about, you can go through a bad moment, and like I was talking about earlier, momentum swings are constant in fights. You got to take them as moments, whether it's good or bad. You know, it's the way it is. I remember going down against Cotto. I was down. It was 10-8. I was fine when it was a flash. I was totally fine when I got up. But you know what? It's going to be 10-8 whether I fight hard in this round or not. You know what I did? I didn't try to win the rest of the second round. I was like, you know what? Screw it. He got a 10-8. No matter how hard I'm just going to waste energy if I try to win the second round.
Well, that's why I took a knee. So I was like, it doesn't matter. I'm already down. I got to survive this round.
And I thought I won round 3, even though none of the judges gave it to me. I thought I won round 3.
Real quick, though, you said put your tools on the table. It's funny. And you're talking about fighters that can really erase you. I liken that to gunslingers. And like you got your tools are your guns. Yeah. It's your sidearms. But with those kind of guys, I mean, if you're slinging, gunslingers get shot.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Swimmers get wet. Yeah. Gunslingers get shot. Yeah. So if you're gonna take those risks,
but that's why you do it, bro. You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
It's like Evander Holyfield said about his trilogy with Riddick Bowe. So when you feel the pain, you're still in the game.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
You know, speaking of Holyfield, I can remember. I can remember the night. I'm young here at this point. I wasn't even boxing yet. So I don't understand the psychology of a fighter like I do now, right? But I can remember being in my grandfather's house and watching Tyson Seldon, right? And Tyson Seldon was in September, and I think it was September 6th or something like that. And then Tyson Holyfield was already signed for November 9th. Like, you don't even see that today, right? Mm-hmm. It was like one pay-per-view and another pay-per-view back-to-back signed there. That's how big Tyson was. And I can remember Tyson getting the knockout, and we were all just like, wow, it's crazy. You know, Tyson out of jail. He's got the momentum. And I can remember my uncle saying, my uncle's a little older than me, and he had boxed for like a year, but he didn't do it competitively. And I hadn't started boxing, so I don't understand the psychology at all. But again, happy to be here and not happy to be here. Seldon was happy to be there. You know, he just wanted to get out. He didn't even get hit with a clean shot. But I remember they showed on the schedule November 9th, Tyson versus Holyfield. And I remember my uncle saying, this guy's going to fight. He's not going to win. Nobody thought Holyfield would win. He goes, but he's going to fight. He's not going to do no Seldon. He goes, this guy's. And obviously we had already known Holyfield's reputation. He'd been through the Bowe rivalry and everything. But, you know, that was the first time where I thought about the psychology of a fighter from that perspective. I'm like, yeah, Holyfield, you know, he doesn't, because this guy Seldon got hit with grazing shots and he just, you know, packed it in.
Checked out.
And I'm like, yeah. And, that was the first time it dawned on me. Again, I didn't even start boxing yet. I hadn't even had a day in the gym yet. But, the psychology of a fighter, that right then and there. You know what? We saw on November 9th what ended up happening. Holyfield did not show up, to survive. He showed up, he was not happy to just to be there. Holyfield showed up to win and was physical from the first round.
Ultimately, it's a choice.
And you go there to establish yourself. If you're Ramon Cardenas, you've got to establish yourself early in that fight. You've got to show Inoue, okay, you got all knockout wins. Yeah, you're a great fighter, but I didn't come here to bow down to you and appease you. I'm here to fight you. Whatever, let's throw hands and let's do it.
Well, Luis Neri did that too, and we know how that one ended.
Yeah, but you know what? You still got to go.
You got to go for it.
The responsibility of a fighter,
get shot.
The mentality of a fighter, exactly.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we don't play a team sport. Nobody's sitting on the bench. No one's here to participate in a big fight. You are in the big fight, and you're there to win. We'll see how Ramon Cardenas does, and as it makes news, we'll talk about it right here on Boxing Scene Today. Find out why millions are watching.